Hey community, it's Pastor Kathleen with today's Bible reading. We're going to be looking at a short passage near the end of the New Testament. And it is written by the Apostle John. And John also wrote the Gospel of John, the book of Revelation, and then these 3 shorter books or letters. And they were written to a small network of house churches. And they just give basics about following Jesus. And even though they're basic, it's still really hard to fully embrace and sometimes to fully understand what is written. John wrote about light and love and life. And the verses we're going to look at today in 1 John chapter 3 focus on love. So listen to 1 John chapter 3 verses 1 through 3. See what great love the Father has lavished on us, that we should be called children of God, and that is what we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Dear friends, now we are children of God, and what we will be has not yet been made known. But we know that when Christ appears, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. All who have this hope in him purify themselves, just as he is pure. This week in our series before Christmas, we are focusing on God's love, on how Jesus coming shows us how much he loves us. We know that Jesus became like us, and when he did that, we were able to better see his love. He suffered and died for us so we could more fully understand and embrace his love for us. God lavishes his love on us because we are his children. We belong to God's family. And yet this isn't by our own initiative. It's by what God did. And even in 1 John chapter 4, we're reminded that we love because he first loved us. So it's God's initiative that makes us children of God. And then he lavishes this love on us. I think it's really important to see in these verses, first of all, it talks about the amount of God's love. It says, see what great love the Father has lavished on us. So it's like this emphasis on the amount, the extent of God's love. And then also the reminder that it says he calls us. He calls us. He called us to be children of God. And that calling isn't just the idea of calling you by name. It's the idea of inaugurating a new relationship. So we are lavishly loved as being part of God's family. Now, I don't know about you, but I think it's really easy to say, God loves you. God loves me. Those 3 words, really easy to say. I think it takes more work, more reflection, even pausing, to have those words deeply penetrate all of the doubting and dark spaces in your heart and mind. So I encourage you to take time to reflect on how those 3 words, God loves you. He lavishly loves you. How that can penetrate your life today and make a difference. And even think about inhaling how lavish God's love is and exhaling that you are deeply loved. You know, I wonder if you have ever thought about God gazing at you, God gazing over you. Maybe that feels awkward or just kind of weird, but I really believe that God gazes at us with love. I mean, think about how you feel when you look at an amazing sunset, the colors, just the splendor of that, or crashing waves over rocks at the ocean. Or have you ever had the opportunity to hold a sleeping newborn baby and just gaze at the miracle of that new life? I believe God gazes over us with that same kind of delight and wonder and amazement as we are his children. So again, I just encourage you to ponder and reflect on God's loving gaze over you, at you, and to let that penetrate again those doubting, those dark spaces. And as I close today, just a couple things. You know, there's a lot of things in these short verses that I haven't talked about. If you have any questions, be sure that you reach out to any of us with things that you might wonder about in this passage or any of the other passages. And also, I want to close in a sense, by giving you a blessing by reading these verses in the Voice translation. So hear these words and let them speak over you about God's lavish love. Consider the kind of extravagant love the Father has lavished on you. He calls you his child. It's really true. You are his beloved child. And in the same way the world didn't recognize him, the world doesn't recognize you either. When you feel like you're not good enough to be loved by God, you can remember that God's love is greater than your doubts. You must silence the sounds of condemnation so you can hear the voice of God's loving assurance and remember that he has selected you to be part of his family. You have been adopted into God's family and you are officially his child. The full picture of your destiny isn't clear yet, but we know this much. When Jesus appears, you will be like him because you will see him just as he is. All those who focus their hopes on him and his coming, they will seek to purify themselves just as he is pure.